All right, so I hope the students out there have seen that question and have gone ahead and attempted that. All right. Well, a very good morning to all of you joining in from the US, and a very good evening to all joining in from India. So, well, my name is Khwaja, and I am Director of University Relations for Simple Ed. And I welcome you all to this Simple Ed's web interaction on medical careers in the US. So, this is something very, very specific that we wanted to address. There were a lot of queries from students whenever we used to interact, go on school campuses, on our recruiting tours with the US university representatives and otherwise as well. So, this is something that was much sought after, and therefore we have come up with this. So thank you so much for taking out time and joining us from India and the US. All right, and a very, very special thanks to our expert panelists today, who have taken out time and who have joined us from United States. Well, I would first go ahead and briefly introduce our panelists that we have. Well, to begin with, we have Dr. Anam Tanvir, who is MD and who is a physician with Prima Medicals in San Francisco, California. Thank you so much for joining in. We have Terence Graham, who is SIO from School of Pharmacy, University of South California. George Burke from University at Albany, SUNY, New York. He is the international admissions specialist. Then we have Jim Crawley, who is Director of Global Recruitment from Hope College, Michigan. We also were to have Donald Stewart, who is the Vice Chancellor Enrollment Services Director of Admissions from Upstate University of South Carolina. But unfortunately, due to some last-minute engagements, she could not join in. So, well, I would also like to let you know that we have a co-host with us today as well. Of course, she would be joining. She would not be speaking, but we are partnering with Pearson for this. And we have Shirley Jen, who is the Recognition Service Manager from Pearson, who has joined us today as well. So thank you so much, Shelley, for joining in. And Pearson has also agreed to share some special vouchers. So we'll go ahead and share them with you as well. All right. Can we move to the next slide, please? All right. So now I would begin with the presentation. And at the very outset, I would like to call in Dr. Anam Tanvir to introduce this entire effort of ours and share what she has to with these potential students from India. So can we have Dr. Anam Tanvir? Naveen, could you make her the presenter, please? Dr. Tanvir, you just need to switch on the video icon and the microphone icon that you see on the AV pod screen, like we did in the test. Yeah, there we go.
Are you able to hear and see me?
Hi, thank you so much. Yes, Dr. Tanvir, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. As Hwaja mentioned, my name is Dr. Anam Tanvir. It's an honor to be here. I am a practicing physician here in San Francisco. I did both my education, my primary, secondary education, and my training in the United States. My specialty is family medicine. I primarily practice in an outpatient clinic. So I see patients of all age groups and variety of medical conditions. That's the focus of my specialty, which is family medicine. I understand that's sometimes referred to as a general practitioner in other parts of the world. If we could move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I wanted to go into a little bit about the path to becoming a physician in the United States and briefly touch on how that compares to the education and training in India from my limited knowledge on that. So in the United States, you do 4 years of undergraduate training. So I did mine at University of California, Irvine, and I majored in biological sciences. And after that, the process is 4 years of medical school. So medical school is always 4 years regarding of the specialty that you do practice into. And my medical school was in Florida at Lake Erie College of Osteopathic Medicine. After medical school, depending on which specialty you choose on, you move on to residency training. So for me specifically, I chose family medicine during the end of my medical school period. And for that is a 3-year residency training program. And my residency specifically was at Arrowhead Regional Medical Center in Southern California. And after residency, you can apply for full term or part time, whatever would be more appropriate to your lifestyle, employment. And for family medicine, there's a wealth of opportunities within United States and openings that you can apply for. And I chose to do that here in San Francisco. And in comparison, in India, there's 5 years of MBBS followed by an optional 2 years of MD. So that's a little bit of what it entails to become a physician in United States and the process with that. If we could move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I wanted to discuss a little bit about other fields within medicine that are available in United States other than my field as a physician. So I want to first talk about pharmacist. So a pharmacist, a little bit about their education is same thing as for MDs in the US. You have to do 4 years of bachelor's degree followed by 4 years of pharmacy school. And from my understanding, they do not have a residency training like the MDs do. And I want to talk about the next career as a physician assistant. And in my field, I actually work with both physician assistants and nurse practitioners. So these are what they refer as mid-level practitioners. Mid-level practitioners, they are not medical doctors, but they do a lot of responsibilities that are that of a doctor with a little bit of a different training. So let's talk a little bit about physician assistant. So they have to also do 4 years of bachelor's degree, followed by 2 years of physician assistance program. And there's no residency training for them. And they do have the luxury of picking whichever specialty they would like to. And then they move on to that after the 2 years of physician assistance program. And then we have nurse practitioners. These are our other mid-level practitioners that do also work in clinics and hospital settings along with medical doctors. So most nurse practitioners had been working as full-time nurses for several years before they move on to pursuing a career as a nurse practitioner. So a full-time nurse would who has already had a bachelor's degree and nursing degree under her belt would move on to nurse practitioner school, which generally is a 2-year program. And then after that, just like with physician assistants, they do not have residency training, and they do also have the luxury of picking whichever specialty they would be interested in. And then we have optometrist. For those who don't know what an optometrist is, optometrist focuses on visual exams and a lot of your diagnosis related to your eyes. For an optometrist, same thing. You need 4 years bachelor's degree followed by a 4-year optometry program, which is separate from a medical school program. As in, it specifically focuses just on optometrist education. And then we have psychiatrist. So what a psychiatrist does is it focuses, he or she focuses on a lot of mental illnesses, for example, depression, anxiety. They do also have to do 4 years of bachelor's degree followed by 4 years of medical school, just like I had to do. And then they have to do a residency training in psychiatry as well, which generally is around a 3 to 4 year program. And radiologists are your medical doctors who specialize in reading your radiological imaging, such as X-rays, CT scans, MRIs. And a radiologist is also a medical doctor, just like psychiatrist. They have to do 4 years of bachelor's degree, followed by 4 years of medical school, and then 3 to 4 year program in radiology. Some radiologists do specialize in specific areas, so they have to do additional training on top of their residency training for that specialized focus. So that's just a little bit into some of the careers in the United States. So you're not limited to just being a MD or a physician. They have, as I mentioned, a wealth of other opportunities, and based on your interest and how many years you want to spend in training and what your life goals are, you can pick an appropriate career. And that would be it for this slide. I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Haja. Haja, we cannot hear you.
All right. So thank you so much, Dr. Tanvir, for letting us know this so briefly and crisply, and especially, getting us into these variety of careers that we have. So now, can I please request Naveen to make Terence the presenter, please? And of course, I would encourage students to please go ahead and ask your questions, and you can write in your questions in the chat box, and we will be happy to address them. All right, so we have uh, Terence, who can just turn on the video and microphone, and we'll be good to go.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes. All right, Terence, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Great, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with this distinguished panel, and I want to say a thank you to the team at Simple Ed for including me in this event. It's exciting to be here representing the University of Southern California's School of Pharmacy. And I appreciate the opening remarks by Dr. Tanvir. That was a good overview to give you a sense of some of the different directions you can go in. And one of the points I'll make in my brief presentation is that there are many different directions you can go with a degree in pharmacy, not necessarily maybe the traditional pathway in pharmacy. Let's go on to the next slide. Just briefly about the University of Southern California School of Pharmacy. We are the the top-ranked private school of pharmacy in the United States. One of the leaders in the field, very, very high rankings. We're right in the heart of Los Angeles, which is the second largest city in the United States. Very vibrant, diverse, dynamic city. And we're on the health sciences campus of the University of Southern California, which really positions us well as a school of pharmacy. The reason being that we are surrounded by 4 hospitals, and our students do a lot of their practical work in those hospitals. We also have an extensive network of clinics and pharmacies across the Los Angeles area where our students go for practical training. And that practical training is a key part of the pharmacy education and is really what lays the groundwork for the future career pathways of our graduates. And if you go around Southern California, you'll see the imprint of the University of Southern California School of Pharmacy. Anywhere you go, any pharmacy you go to, more than half of the pharmacists practicing in Southern California are alumni of the USC School of Pharmacy. Next slide, please. Just to give you a sense of the School of Pharmacy, we have 4 major departments within the school, and this presents a picture of the different directions that you can go with a pharmacy degree. We have the Department of Clinical Pharmacy, the Titus Family Department of Clinical Pharmacy, the Department of Pharmacology and Pharmaceutical Sciences, so much more of the laboratory work, the drug development work is done in that department. The Department of Pharmaceutical and Health Economics, so here we get a little bit more into the business side, but also some of the policy making side and government agency side with that health economics direction. And then lastly, we have a Department of Regulatory and Quality Sciences. And this is there are not that many departments of regulatory and quality sciences around the US, and we are one of the few that has a focus not only on regulation and compliance with regard to consumable medicines, but also medical devices, and that's a rapidly growing global field for people with that degree. Next slide, please. So just to list some of the directions that our students go in, some of these might sound familiar, but others we can talk about. But the core degree at the School of Pharmacy, and Dr. Tanvir mentioned this, is the PharmD degree. If you want to practice as a pharmacist, you really must have a PharmD degree and be licensed in the state to practice pharmacy. And each state has its own licensure process. There's actually a nationwide test and then a state test that you must pass in order to be licensed as a pharmacist. And there are some different pathways for folks who, if you have a pharmacy degree from India, for example, there are different ways that you can, different pathways to licensure in the United States if that's the direction that you want to go in. So that PharmD degree is a 4-year degree, the core degree. There is the opportunity to do 1 or 2 years of residency after completion of the PharmD, and that's for students who really want to focus in some specific areas, or perhaps go into more research or academic related areas. You can do residency. That is optional. You don't need the residency to practice as a pharmacist. So the PharmD degree is a postgraduate degree in the U.S. So after 4 years, in our case at the University of Southern California, you must have a bachelor's degree to pursue a PharmD or to enroll in a PharmD with us. That's not the case at some other places don't necessarily require the bachelor's degree. So you can look at a range of options there for the PharmD, but for the top tier institutions like USC, that bachelor's degree is an absolute requirement prior to pursuing the PharmD. And some of the areas, and we keep statistics on this for our PharmD graduates, probably the number one direction students go into is in really community retail pharmacy. And this is an area, pharmacy in general, yeah, it's a very well-paying, very stable profession. There's steady demand for pharmacists. In terms of job placement of our graduates, it's really 100%. They're not struggling to find work. We work very closely with our students to place them. Clinical pharmacy practice is a popular direction, but really the number one direction is that number two bullet point I have there, community retail. And here, the retail pharmacy, there's chain pharmacies around the United States, around the world really, but you see around the United States, some of the large companies are Walgreens and CVS and Duane Reade and others that you'll see on almost every corner in a city such as Los Angeles. And each of those chain pharmacies have pharmacists there on staff who are helping consult with the patients, who are helping prepare the medications for the patients. But similar to that is what we call community pharmacies or independent pharmacies. So these are pharmacies that are very directly working with the community, but just not part of a large chain. And this is a growing area. I mean, just looking at the statistics, most recent statistics, you see about 13% growth in independent pharmacies, as opposed to fairly flat growth of the chain pharmacies. And so this is an area that's definitely of interest and good prospect for our students. The pharmaceutical industry, obviously this is an industry that the other thing about pharmacy is it's very stable, and the pandemic has really demonstrated that the pharmaceutical industry obviously is very much involved in working on vaccines and therapeutics for COVID-19, and we see a lot of our graduates going into industry. And that's a popular direction and a quite lucrative career direction for our graduates. Governmental agencies, there's always a need for expertise in agencies. Home health care is a growing direction for pharmacists as well. And hospital pharmacies. Hospital pharmacies is actually our number two direction. Partly this is because we're so close with many pharmacies that our students do go into working in hospitals where they're working side by side in the care team with the physicians, with the doctors, consulting about the medicines to prescribe, the dosage levels, the frequency, and drug interaction concerns that might arise. So the pharmacies are part of that comprehensive care team that consists of the physicians and the pharmacists, the anesthesiologists, radiologists, others involved in that entire team. Now, for more of the, going to the right side of my slide, more of the business side, healthcare decision analysis, biopharmaceutical marketing, these are two areas for really are geared toward folks who want to take that scientific background, that knowledge of pharmacy, and apply it in more of a private sector position in the pharmaceutical industry. And so those really focus more on the healthcare decision analysis, looking at markets, making business decisions within companies based on the knowledge that you have from your pharmacy training. Very, very high demand for those specialists in private industry. Biopharmaceutical marketing is a new degree with us. Obviously, looking at aspects with bringing drugs to market and how to make those, bring those to consumers. Pharmaceutical sciences, again, this is the laboratory focused, but much of this is done actually in computational ways, developing drugs, exploring how drugs will interact with the human body based on physiology and chemistry, very, very science-based specialization, very much in demand. Health economics, as I mentioned, more policy-oriented and business-oriented. And then down in the lower left, the regulatory quality sciences I mentioned. There you see about 3/4 of our graduates with that degree are going into private industry, and the other 25% or so going into government entities that regulate food and drugs, supplement medical devices. And so their role in private industry is really to help navigate the bureaucracy of bringing a drug or a device to market, making sure it's in compliance, making sure that there aren't going to be any difficulties with legal issues down the road. That's our regulatory quality sciences. Very, very high demand. We have 100% placement, job placement of those students. And the salary is quite, even the average salary 150,000, so very, very solid earnings for those students who come out of that program. And we have masters, and most of the students do a master's in that program. Some at more advanced levels will do a PhD. Go to the next slide, please. And just it's my final slide, just to say that the directions of pharmacy graduates, that this is something that's really continually evolving as the role of pharmacists evolves, and this is something that USC is very involved in. And I mentioned the role that pharmacists play in comprehensive medicine management teams and really comprehensive care teams. We're seeing in the United States that this approach, of this sort of integrated approach of having the physician and having the pharmacist and having a social worker, having all of these folks working as a team to provide care to the highest risk patients. That is really a very effective and cost-efficient way to provide care. And having a pharmacist on that team is crucial because of managing the medicine, the dosaging, looking at drug interactions, and those aspects is a key. It's a key voice to have in that team. And so we see that pharmacists more and more are playing that role in patient care. In the past, my colleagues have said pharmacists are overeducated and underutilized. It is a very rigorous education, excellent training. I think in the past, this notion of pharmacists just sitting in a pharmacy and counting pills and putting the pills into a bottle, that's an outdated notion of the value that pharmacists bring to the healthcare system, and that is being recognized across the United States and around the world. The importance of having a pharmacist as part of that care team. The impact of COVID, we're seeing this around the world, but this is also impacting how pharmacists are seeing their future. Significant increase in telemedicine, doing consultations remotely. But if you think about it, pharmacists are often at the forefront. You think of underserved communities. Just looking at the United States, there are 88,000 pharmacies around the United States. And there's a growing recognition that when people need care, often the first person they go and talk to is their local pharmacist, their community pharmacist. And so the training that pharmacists get and the knowledge that they have is crucial in making that first interaction with patients and serving communities where there might not be as much access to doctors or hospital health care. Growth in private industry, we're going to see the pharmaceutical industry changing over the next few years. Lots of collaboration, consolidation, and opportunities for pharmacists. And then regulatory science, that's very much a global industry as the global regime for regulation of medical medicines and devices is harmonized and brought into alignment across the world. So I'll stop there. Thank you for your attention. I'll leave my email contact in the chat and look forward to hearing from you after the session.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Terence. Well, I would like to, in fact, take a question from one of the students there, and I would like Dr. Terence to address that. What is the difference between, I have Rajesh who's asking, what is the difference between chemist and a pharmacist? So would you like to address that, please?
Yeah, I think that's really just a linguistic difference. I think what we would call in the United States a pharmacist would in other countries be called a chemist, and I think that's more of a historical terminology for a chemist. But that really, they're synonymous in my mind. A pharmacist is what you would call a chemist.
All right. So there's another question that is for Dr. Tanveer. So Naveen, if you could bring on Dr. Tanveer as well, so that we could address maybe a couple of questions. And of course, Dr. Terence would be around. Students, if you have more questions for him, we can address them at the end as well. Hi, Dr. Tanvir. So there was this student asking about, yeah, Akanksha was asking about uh, at what level you entered United States. Was it after your 10th or your 12th?
It was actually way before that. I started 8th grade in United States, so this was prior to starting high school. So just to share for people who might not be aware, so in the United States, after you finish 8th grade, that's when the high school period starts, and that's from 9th grade to 12th grade. And I saw a question about 12th grade and bachelor's degree. So no, bachelor's degree is not equivalent of completing your 12th grade in the United States. Once you finish high school, which as I mentioned was from 9th grade to 12th grade, after that you move on to your bachelor's degree, which is a 4 years degree.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Tanvir. We can address more questions in the end as well. So, Naveen, can we please bring in Jim Crawley, as the presenter? All right, there we go.
Great. Thank you, Kwaja. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. I'm the Director of Global Recruitment at Hope College. I'm going to tell you just really briefly about Hope College, but also talk about the admissions process in general. And I know my colleague, George from the University of Albany, SUNY Albany, will give even other types of details that will be very helpful. So Hope College is a private Christian college in West Michigan. These are 4 reasons. I don't need to read them all to you. That the reasons that students come to Hope College. We're 3,000 students, all undergraduates. So they're all pursuing a bachelor's degree. So one advantage to that is you're not necessarily competing in the laboratories and for opportunities with graduate students, because all we have is undergraduate. With our students, we do have a very high placement into the different health professions, not just medical school. I think it's important to note that 93%, as you notice there, are participating in experiential learning. So 93% of our students are doing internships, or they're doing research or study abroad, or a combination of those 3. We work with our students to help build their profiles so that they do have a very high chance of getting in. Of course, the majority of the work is on the student. I mean, it's up to the student to do well in their classes, but we provide good advice through our academic advising. And the students get advice about not only classes to take, but also extracurricular activities that might be good, professional development opportunities that might look good on the resume. And so working with the advisor is a very important part of the process as you're going through the 4-year experience. We do have a very low class size at the average of 11 to 1 student-teacher ratio, average class size of 14. And we have a very vibrant campus life. We're located in the town of Holland, so we're right next to the downtown area. It's just a 4-block downtown. It's a 34,000 person town, so it's a small town, but we're only about 45 minutes away from the second largest city in Michigan, which is Grand Rapids, and we're a 3-hour train ride from Chicago. So if we can go on to the next slide, just to really briefly show you a couple of things. We are tied, according to U.S. News, we're tied with Cornell in last year's statistics of the top 64 colleges in the U.S. for undergraduate research. So we're very proud of that fact. Again, that's a huge part of what we do at Hope, is the practical experiences. We're also part of the Colleges That Change Lives, which is only 45 colleges in the U.S. That are positively affecting in extraordinary ways the lives of their students. And we're very pleased as well to be in that. Just the pictures you're seeing are some of those unique opportunities. the study abroad opportunities. We do a May term where during May they can do some of these unique things. The woman in the upper right photo is interning at the World Health Organization, which could be a phenomenal experience. I'm sure it was. The bottom left is actually a business group, not science, but a business group that went to the New York Stock Exchange. And the gentleman in the bottom left of that photo, next to the woman in red, he is actually, at the time, was working at the New York Stock Exchange, but now he's the president of Hope College. So he has come on board a year ago to be our president. So there's some incredible opportunities for students at Hope. Let's go on to the next screen, though. And because I want to talk more specifically about STEM and the sciences. So while they're bringing that other screen up, the next screen up, I will start the research aspect of science and engineering. So this gives you an idea of some of the science-based courses that we offer at Hope College. As Dr. Tanvir mentioned, it isn't always just medical school. There's other options as well, including the pharmacy, which you heard about, and then physical therapy, occupational therapy. Our students, through our pre-professional program, really apply to a number of different things. Other ones I just mentioned: chiropractic, dentistry, occupational therapy, physical therapy, optometry, speech and language which I need right now, speech and language pathology. I had to get up pretty early this morning for another seminar. Podiatry, physician's assistant. There's so many possibilities. And again, that's what your time at the undergraduate level is. Some of that time you spend with an advisor to be able to figure out what is the best route for you. What is your path? What is your journey going to be in that undergraduate program? And the advisor can help prepare you for that in ways that I mentioned just previously. So the other thing to mention is that it is very challenging. Dr. Tanvir had the advantage, of course, of being here for high school and then moving on through the undergrad and grad, whereas some of you, of course, are doing all of your high school, and most of you in India. And then you're going to be hopefully coming here for undergrad, or maybe you're going to be doing undergrad there and hoping to come here for grad school. But please recognize that for an international student not educated here, and even a non-U.S. citizen or permanent resident, it is very challenging, very difficult to get into some of the professional schools. And there's a number of explanations that could go into that, but it is very, very challenging. Not to say it's impossible, it's just very challenging. So I always tell students to have a backup plan. You may want to go to medical school, but what would be your plan if you don't get into medical school? Would you go to a different professional program, a different graduate program, or would you go back to India? So, those are things you'd have to think about during your 4-year bachelor's program, and talking and using the advice of the advisor that you're working with. One of the other programs I want to mention on the screen, it's actually in the first bullet point, is neuroscience. Neuroscience is something that fairly recently came more as being an undergrad program, probably in the last decade or so. But before that, it was usually only available at the graduate level, with some exceptions. And now it's a little bit more common at the undergrad level, but that's a combination of psychology and biology. But we do have all of those areas you see there. And as students, we are known as a kind of a STEM strong program, or STEM strong school. And so we do put a lot of students out into the research world and out into graduate programs. So I know there's been some questions about the admissions process. So if we go to the next screen, I can kind of address some of those questions. And the first thing to note, though, is when you apply for admission, it is, for every institution that we have, they could have a different list of requirements. I mean, there's some very common requirements that everybody's going to have, and that would be the first thing being your application process, which is the common application, or the institution might have their own application, depends. But usually it almost always is a link off their website, off their admissions section of their website. So I apologize if I'm going in and out. It says my internet's unstable right now, so my apologies if that's the case. So the personal statement for us is very important. Not everybody requires a personal statement, but for us, we do like to see why you want to go to Hope College and why you've chosen a particular major. Quite often, if you're applying through the common application, there will be a school report that's required from your counselor at your high school or secondary school. There will be the requirement of your secondary school transcripts. So showing your grade 10 and grade 12 marks will be typically a requirement. If you don't have grade 12 yet, if you're still in grade 12, then obviously we're going to use your grade 10 marks, exams, and your grade 11 marks because we won't have grade 12 yet. So it just depends on where you are in the process, but your academic transcripts will be required, your mark sheets. Recommendation letters. I should say, if you're applying for graduate school, then obviously the university transcript is also required. The recommendation letters may be optional, depends on the school. You have to look at each individual school and what they're asking for. So an interesting one right now is the SAT scores or ACT scores. Many schools in the U.S., probably 2/3 of the schools in the U.S. right now have gone test optional because of COVID and the lack of test dates. So you do need to check the particular school and see what their policy is. Sometimes they're test optional for admission. Sometimes it's test optional but you have to have a test for, scholarship. And sometimes it's just test optional totally. At Hope College, we're test optional totally for international students. If you do have a strong SAT, sure, I would like to see it. But it is optional whether you include it or not. So we are really relying on your academic transcript, the classes you've had, the marks you've received, possibly your personal statement, possibly recommendation letters. I mean, we've got to rely on all of that information since many students have not been able to take the SAT. If it is provided and it's a strong score, then sure, that's going to be a positive aspect in your file. But if a school is test optional, then that means you don't have to supply it. And if you don't supply it, it is not supposed to be a detriment or a negative in your file if you don't have it, if the school is truly test optional. Now, for us, the verification of financial support is going to be made after the offer of admission, but for most schools, it's required as part of the application process. So you need to show, the full year of support through a bank statement from your family or sponsor. We just do it slightly different, where I make the admissions offer and the scholarship offer, and then I have you show the balance of what's needed. And I do show you a little bit about our scholarships there at the bottom of the page. We, again, are basing it primarily on your academics because that's what we have to work with. But I do review everything in your file in coming to an admissions decision and a scholarship decision. So that's a little bit about Hope College, a little bit about applying for admission. Again, the criteria do change from school to school. We're looking for the equivalent to a B average from academics to get in. But I will note that our grade average of our first year class is about a 3.8 out of 4. So it's a very, very strong class, but we will consider students with a B average or a 3.0 out of 4. So we convert your grades over to, if they're not already in an A, B, C grade scheme. So the next screen is just my contact information, but I will, if you want to put that up, you can, but I will be happy to entertain any questions. I think I've tried to touch upon some of them that are in the chat box, but I'm happy to answer any other ones as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jim. And I see a question from Kritika Sharma. She's wanting, and I think a lot of students are very curious about scholarships. So would you like to share something on that? And I think you briefly did mention, but if you want to shed some more light on that.
Sure. This is another situation where it will change from school to school. So it's very good to ask that question, but please pose the question to all the schools that you're looking at, or check their websites to see what they might offer. They will usually list what the criteria are for that scholarship. I know for us, like I said, it's the equivalent to a B average of 3.0 out of 4 and above. But other people, it might be higher than that. It's potential even for some schools that could be a little bit lower than that. It just depends. But again, we're looking primarily at the academics, unless they have indicated on their website that the test scores, are needed for scholarship. which is totally possible. It just depends on the school. And then the amounts as well will vary. So, private schools like Hope College are more expensive, so our scholarships tend to be a little bit larger. Public schools tend to be less expensive than privates, but their scholarships also tend to be smaller. So what we try to do at the private school is bring it as close as we can, bring the cost down to what you would pay to go to a public school. Keep in mind that there's no difference in the U.S. between public and private in terms of quality. It's just a matter of where they're getting some of their funding. So don't shy away from public or private. It's more finding an institution that fits your needs academically and maybe where in the country you want to be and the size and that kind of thing. So hopefully that helps a little bit. It's a very generic answer, but every school is a little bit different, and you need to check with each one.
Right. So very rightly mentioned, Jim. Thank you so much on that. And I would now request Naveen to please bring in Jim Crawley. Sorry, to bring in George as a presenter, because yeah, thank you so much. And before that, I would also just like to make an announcement that the recording of this entire session will be shared with the all those high schools which could not make it to this session because they are having their midterm exams. So we will be sharing the recording with those high schools as well. All right. So thank you so much, George, and you can go ahead with your presentation.
It's great to be here. I'm sorry I don't have a PowerPoint because I was trying to gauge what was going to be presented or not presented to all of you. But what I hope to do is give you some insights and further detail on some of the information already provided. I think Mr. Crowley did an excellent job giving you the basics about admission, and most of those here are the same for almost all U.S. universities in America. So you can follow those as far as common application, particular application. But I want to speak to, first and foremost, the U.S. medical system is so different than any other medical system in the world. In that, I mean, it's all about specializations. We have over 135 medical health professionals in the United States. So you could pursue your interest in medicine, medical care, healthcare in many different ways. A few of those not yet mentioned are things like athletic training, physical therapy, occupational therapy. There's many things in the nursing profession that expand the activities. There are quite a few things that if I were to go through all 135, we'd have to be here for 2 days. Now, how do you approach that career in the United States? The way U.S. universities do it, and the one thing that we want to share that I'd like to share with all of you is most of our universities have what are called pre-health advisors. So their role besides your major, whether it's biology, chemistry, physics, business, you can move in a healthcare field. But we have an advisor to help you take the appropriate courses to move into those fields. They also spend your first year or two telling you about all the options that you may have in the healthcare field that you can apply to. And so, and what you will need to gain those. I'll drop back a little bit about medical school, and Mr. Crowley was very accurate that there are limited possibilities for non-citizens and non-permanent residents to enter medical school in the United States, but they do exist. Albany, in fact, has one program that has a direct admission after 2 years into a medical college in which international students are eligible to apply to that program. Now, you've got to be top student, very good, very excellent, but so does the American student to get into that program. So we also have direct admission. If any of you are U.S. citizens and permanent residents to 3 other medical colleges. Now, we don't have a medical college. We have a health sciences center in which the primary focus is biomedical sciences and public health. We are the leading public health program in the East Coast. We are in Albany, New York, which is 2.5 hours from New York City and 2.5 hours from Boston. We are in charge of the state of New York and city of New York's public health programs. So that's some of our strengths in healthcare. We also have a strength in the area of neuroscience, as well as in almost all pre-health majors. But as I've shared with you, our programs are meant to take students from their high school into undergraduate program, inform them how to enter the healthcare and medical care fields, and then help prepare them for those fields. And most colleges and universities in the United States do that. Now, as Mr. Crowley said, private schools give larger amounts of scholarship, but their tuition is larger. A school like mine offers scholarships in the amount of $12,000 a year for excellent students. You'll find every school has a different program and different policy as far as that is concerned. And so you need to really check out what those programs are and what those policies are in those fields. Our admissions procedure, as Mr. Crowley mentioned, is pretty similar. More and more U.S. universities are test optional, which means you're not required to either submit an SAT or ACT. You are, though, required to prove language ability. So there are a couple online exams that you can do, which is called Duolingo. There are TOEFL and IELTS are offering programs. Pearson also offers programs, and we accept the Pearson program. So feel free to use the Pearson scores when you apply to most U.S. universities. I would like to use the remaining time, since we only have about 10 minutes to go in this session, to begin just answering the many questions, because I think that the population that's out there is very diverse, and to go through all of the medical fields would be very complicated. But I have put my contact information, both my WhatsApp number as well as my email, and I'll put it in again in the chat box so you can see it before we end. But I think Jim and I think the doctor would love to answer questions, because to me, your questions are more important than us just talking about and guessing what information you're looking for. So please feel free, and I'd like to use the remainder of the time, and I'm sure others will join in with me to answer your questions. So thank you. What's the criteria for getting a scholarship? Your academic performance. Sometimes test scores. Some schools require test scores, but at Albany, we do not require a test score. We purely work off your 10th and 11th grade scores and halfway through your 12th grade scores. You will get a decision from us by January or February before you come to the university. Is it compulsory to clear in India for getting admission for further studies? Clear, what's the word NEET? I don't know what NEET means.
George, I would like to address that. Well, students.
Okay.
Yeah, so NEET is an exam that the students have to appear for or write in India. So anyone who is interested in pursuing medical studies outside India, I mean, particularly in United States, and go ahead and stay in United States and practice. So that is not mandatory. I mean, any kind of exams would be mandatory when you have to come back and practice in India. So there I mean, of course, you have to go through whatever process you have to in United States, but that would not be applicable for higher studies in United States in the medical field.
Okay, to get into medical school in the United States, you do have to take an exam called the MCAT exam.
Right.
So that's the medical exam. Most doctors who have received education in India would eventually have to take an equivalent exam if they want to practice medicine in the United States. In fact, the majority of those that were not born in the United States that are of Indian descent actually have medical degrees from Indian medical colleges. So I always recommend to an Indian student, if you qualify for the medical school in India that you're that is one that interests you and you want to be a doctor, do that, and you could pursue postgraduate studies in many fields, and then that will help lead you to getting qualified for medical school in the United States. And that's the direction I usually advise students from other countries. Now, if your goal is to be in America no matter what, and you're 17, 18 years old, 16, 17, 18, just be prepared to choose other fields in the medical, like pharmacy, like nursing, like physician assistant, dentistry, orthopedic medicine, many, many, many fields, occupational therapy, physical therapy. Yes, there is. It's called the PCAT exam, like the MCAT. It's a pharmacy exam rather than a MCAT exam. So yes, there is an exam to enter pharmacy school. Other questions?
Yes, there's another question that says we have Tanvi who's asking that question. Can you please brief about the admission procedure for Boston University? What's the deadline to fill forms? How's the admission
That
procedure carried out?
Yeah, I'm not an expert. The U.S. has 4,200 colleges and universities.
Right.
They're all independent. But I'm going to guess, and I haven't looked at their website, Mr. Crowley
Yeah.
outlined 99.9% of the same activity that all of us do. So if you hear a presentation by most American colleges and universities, the only thing that might change is the deadlines. And that each school sets their own deadlines and their own requirements. As they may have specific deadlines that you apply for on a certain day by a certain date, or you apply for a scholarship by a certain date. But each school has to be done individually. Nobody that I know of can speak to everybody's deadline. But for the most part, I recommend students that if you apply no later than December 1st of your 12th grade, you will have met 99.9% of all application deadlines. So that's the goal that I always share with students. And that's sort of the goal of most American students, to have applied by December 1st of every year. So we always like to say, parents of children, we have a special holiday in the United States called Thanksgiving. And we tell the 12th grade child, if you want to have fun on Thanksgiving vacation, you have to and that's always the last week of November. You have to have all your college application materials in, your letters of recommendation, your test scores, your application forms, your counselors, advisors forms. So if you mark and circle December 1st, you'll meet everybody's deadline. Okay, so that's what I recommend.
Right. All right. Thank you so much, George. Well, can Naveen please bring in Dr. Terrence again, because I see a few questions addressed to him. Naveen, if you can hear me, can you please make Dr. Terence the presenter? Right. You're on mute, Dr. Terence.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes,
Good.
please. All right. So yeah, you could go ahead and address questions there for you. I mean, specifically,
Yeah, so
I think you did address a few questions in the chat box itself, but yeah, you could go ahead and talk.
yeah, I did put some responses in the chat box, which you can view. There was a question about the test that's required, and George just mentioned that for Pharm D programs, and that's sort of the core program to become a pharmacist in the U.S. There's a common application, if you will, that's called PharmCAS, and I put the link in the chat box to that. And one of the requirements for that PharmCAS process is to take the PCAT exam, which is the pharmacy college admission test. And so that does test the scientific knowledge that you have, and to make sure that you have the foundational knowledge needed for entry into a PharmD program. For other programs, for our master's programs that are in, say, pharmacology and drug development and regulatory sciences, most of those programs do not require the GRE any longer. We're waiving the GRE and eliminating that at our school. We will require the TOEFL for foreign applicants. PhD programs do require the GRE and will continue to require that. In terms of scholarships, I've seen those questions come up quite a bit. The way our applications for the PharmD, it's quite competitive, I should say, and we rank our candidates based on a number of factors. And some of the stronger candidates, we will offer some partial scholarships for those candidates to try to persuade them to choose the USC School of Pharmacy. And then there are other partial scholarships available. It's on a program by program basis for our master's programs. But for the PhD, if you are admitted, if you're applying for a PhD at the USC School of Pharmacy in something like health economics or pharmaceutical sciences, PhD students are fully funded. So it's extremely competitive, but if you are selected, then you will receive a full scholarship to pursue your PhD in the School of Pharmacy. I did want to mention that we do have an undergraduate degree in drug development and pharmacology. That is an excellent preparation for going into a PharmD program, but it's also excellent preparation if you want to go on to medical school or some other healthcare field. That's a relatively new undergraduate degree that we have. It just started in 2018. But that's something, if you're looking for a bachelor's degree, that could be something to look at USC. That could be a pathway then on to the postgraduate degrees required for practicing medicine or pharmacy and other healthcare professions in the US.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Terence. And can we bring in Jim Crawley again, please? Naveen, if you could make him the presenter and he could address a few questions as well. Right, Jim. If you can hear me, then you could please go ahead and address any of the questions that you found there in field.
Yeah, sure. I think this one was actually addressed, but for the U.S. College or University for the bachelor's program, we will be getting your file when you're not done with 12th year yet. So we will be looking at the 10th grade marks, your 11th grade year marks, as well as, depending on when you apply during 12th grade, we may get the first semester there. And then as we mentioned, the SAT is optional for most schools in the U.S., but you want to check the individual schools to see about that. So any ending exams that you would normally take at the end of secondary school, we would not, we would not have them yet at the point of admission. And then anything that you might take in your way, I can't remember the explanation on the NEET score, whether that's for medical school here, but basically for medical school, as we talked, the MCAT is what is going to be required, and that's taken between your third and fourth year of, if I'm not mistaken, between your third and fourth year of your bachelor's program. So good question here about students with different majors going to any of the health programs. And yes, certainly you can have really any major and apply to a health program, a master's or doctoral level program. However, it's going to be very important to work with your advisor to make sure you have the right science classes and background courses that they're going to want to see for that particular professional school. Good example is, there's been English majors or communication majors that have gone to medical school. Well, that their major was communication or English, but they also had a really strong science background, and they worked with their advisor to say, okay, I want my communication major, but what science courses do I need to be considered for medical school? So, they almost have kind of a second major going on there in one of the sciences, not necessarily, but pretty close, because they want to have all the right courses that the medical school will be looking for, kind of almost like prerequisite classes, sort of. But yeah, you can go in any major, and that's where it comes into play, all these other health science type areas too. So, we might have a student that's looking at med school, but their backup plan is to go to physical therapy school or to be an athletic trainer. There's so many different options. So it's all about taking the right classes, getting the right background, having the right experiences. So that's where it comes, that when I talked earlier about working with your academic advisor, your pre-professional advisor that was mentioned, that Mr. Burke mentioned that as well. So that's going to be really important, an important part of the process for you at the bachelor's level. Is there other questions? There's questions
All right,
about the fee. Go ahead, Kwaja.
Yeah, please go ahead, Jim. Yeah,
I was just saying, there's questions about the fee structure, and I think Mr. Burke and I both kind of mentioned that, but basically, when we establish an annual fee or cost of attendance at a U.S. school, we're going to include tuition and fees, room and board, books and supplies, and required health insurance. So those will typically all be part of the budget that we will establish as the annual cost of attendance at our school. Some schools will add some other things in there too, depending on what type of school they are. But the ones I mentioned are the most common ones. And for Hope College, that comes out to about $52,000 for everything. But as I mentioned on the one screen, we offer up to $25,000 in scholarships, so that cuts it almost in half. But that's how we establish the fee. Then we have to report those fees. That this is our fee amount. We put that on the immigration document. If you're admitted and show that you have financial support, then that fee structure will also show up on your immigration document. So when you go to your visa interview, you'll take the admission letter, the immigration document, your bank statements, which shows that you have support for the balance of the money after scholarship. So yeah, that's how we establish our fee structure. It changes every year. Good question about campus jobs. Most schools, I don't want to say all because I can't speak for everybody, but I know that most schools do have campus jobs available in a variety of areas: the food service, the laboratories, the athletic department, even the admissions office sometimes, the grounds crew working outside. There's all kinds of possibilities. But please note that number one, as an international student, you can work up to 20 hours a week on campus only. You cannot work off campus without permission. On campus only for up to 20 hours a week while classes are in session, and up to 40 hours a week during vacation times. And that, again, is on campus only. But keep in mind that during working those 20 hours a week, you're not going to make enough to pay your tuition or other big bills. It's going to give you enough for your spending money, basically. Maybe help toward books toward the next semester, but basically, you're not going to make enough money to pay off tuition. One more here. What is criteria for admission after 12th? It really just depends on the school. I mean, everybody's going to have a different level of marks that they want to see. I know for us, it's like a B average or 3.0 out of 4, the equivalent to that, a B average. But every school is a little bit different. Like, the Ivy League schools are highly competitive, extremely competitive, and most of their applicants are all A students. And they only admit on the average of 8 to 15% of their students. So that's pretty selective. Most of us are in the selective or very selective category, not the highly selective. And so we're going to have a certain level that we're looking for, but it does vary by school.
All right. Thank you so much, Jim.
Go ahead. Yeah. Thanks, Khwaja.
Yeah. So Naveen, can we bring in Dr. Tanveer again, please? There are a few questions that were addressed to her.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah. So you could go ahead and address a couple of questions that are there for you.
Sure. So I want to take a step back and talk about the testing requirements for the United States and compare it to those in India. Some of the presenters have already shared that, so some of the information might be a little bit redundant. So from my understanding, in India, after you finish your 12th grade, you take the NEET exam to enter into a medical school. So the NEET exam does not apply at all in United States. So it's not required. No matter what score you get on the NEET exam, it's not going to help you gain admission into a United States medical school. So now let's talk about the requirements, the testing requirements in the US. So in the US, after 12th grade, generally prior to COVID, you were required to either take SATs or ACTs to gain admission into a bachelor's program. But now with COVID, that a lot of scores, as it's been previously been mentioned, a lot of schools have made those exams optional. So from 12th grade, now the SAT, ACT is being optional, you can go on to a 4 years bachelor's program. Now, after you finish the 4 years bachelor's program, you can take the MCAT exam to enter into a medical school. A lot of students don't wait till they finish 4 years of the bachelor's program to take the MCAT. Some of them take it during their last year of bachelor's degree, but that's not required. You can finish your bachelor's degree and then take it and then apply for medical school. So that's some of the differences. I hope that clarifies, and I realize there's a lot of questions about that. I do have colleagues who finished medical school in India or other parts of the world and then wanted to come here to the US and practice. So say you are in that scenario, you finish medical school in India, then to enter into a residency program in the United States, you have to take the board exams, which are called the USMLE board exams. That's a 3-step exam process, and you do have to take all 3 of them after medical school in India to be able to enter into a residency program here in the United States. The USMLE are the same board exams that American American medical students take as well prior to entering a residency program. So I hope that clarifies some of the confusion that I was reading in the questions. Would knowing any third language gonna help to get admissions in any way? I mean, being multilingual definitely helps, and it adds on to your qualifications, but you have to understand a lot of students do speak multiple languages, so it's not necessarily something that's going to give you that competitive edge. And then I saw a question about when you take the MCAT. As I mentioned earlier, you take it near the end of your bachelor's degree or after you've completed your bachelor's degree. How much will we be able to earn through on-campus jobs? So I believe that question's been already addressed. If anyone has questions specific to being a medical doctor in the United States, I'd be happy to address those. And somebody had asked the criteria for admission after 12th from India. I believe that's already been addressed as well.
All right. So thank you so much, Dr. Tanveer, and thank you everyone else, Dr. Terence, Jim, George. Thank you all for joining in, and thank you students from India who have joined in and have been around this late. So thank you once again. We will definitely come up with more interesting um, webinars and useful webinars for students for sure. All right. Thank you all once again.